Oil-stained fingers worked their way around the broken mining drill as David Chen muttered under his breath. The machine looked like someone had taken a sledgehammer to it, but he knew better. This was the work of crystalline dust from the deep mines, eating away at metal like acid rain on old buildings. The miners who brought it in said it was hopeless, but David had seen hopeless before. His repair shop sat on the edge of Titan's Edge, a moon that served as the industrial heart of the outer rim. Most people came here to get rich quick from mining operations. Most people left broke and bitter. David had stayed for 15 years, fixing the machines that kept the desperate and the determined digging deeper into rock that didn't want to give up its treasures. The front bell chimed, and David wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better decades. He expected another miner with another broken piece of equipment and another sob story about how this repair would make or break their operation. Instead, a young woman stood in his doorway, and she definitely wasn't a miner. She was tall, maybe 6.5 feet, with scales that caught the workshop's harsh lights like polished emeralds. Her clothes screamed money, silk that probably cost more than David made in a month, jewelry that could buy his entire shop twice over. A draconian, and clearly from one of the wealthy families that owned most of the mining rights in this sector. "Are you David Chen?" she asked, her voice carrying the slight accent that came from learning human languages in expensive schools, rather than on the streets. "Depends who's asking," David replied, not bothering to hide his suspicion. Rich aliens usually meant trouble, and he had enough of that already. "My name is Lynn." She stepped into the shop, looking around at the organized chaos of spare parts, half-finished repairs, and tools that had been modified so many times their original purposes were lost to history. "I heard you are the best mechanic in this sector." "I'm the cheapest mechanic who gets the job done," David corrected. "What do you need fixed?" Lynn smiled, showing teeth that could probably bite through steel. "I do not need anything fixed. I want to learn," David blinked. "Learn what?" "Human engineering, human repair techniques, the way humans solve problems with machines." She moved closer to the workbench where the mining drill lay in pieces. "I want you to teach me." "Lady, I'm not a teacher. I fix things." David turned back to the drill, hoping she would take the hint and leave. Rich aliens who wanted to play at being mechanics usually got bored fast and left even faster. "I can pay well," Lynn said quietly. David's hands stopped moving. His rent was due next week, and he was 3 payments behind on the shop's power bill. The mining companies had been slow to pay lately, claiming the markets were down. A wealthy student might be exactly what he needed. "How well?" he asked, still not turning around. 50,000 credits. Half now, half when you finish teaching me." David nearly dropped his wrench. 50,000 credits was more money than he usually saw in a year. It was enough to pay off his debts, upgrade his equipment, and maybe even take a vacation for the first time since he'd arrived on Titan's Edge. "What's the catch?" he asked, because there was always a catch when aliens offered that kind of money. "No catch. I simply wish to learn." Lynn moved to another workbench where David had been rebuilding an atmospheric processor. "May I touch this?" "Sure, but be careful. That thing cost more than most people make in 5 years." Lynn's hands moved over the processor with surprising gentleness. Her scaled fingers traced the connections and circuits with the kind of reverence David usually only saw in other mechanics. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "It's a machine," David said, but he found himself watching her face. Most rich people looked at his work like it was beneath them. Lynn looked at it like it was art. "Yes, but see how you have modified it? This connection here." She pointed to a junction where David had spliced 3 different systems together. "This should not work according to standard engineering principles. But you have made it work." David found himself impressed despite his suspicions. Most people, even other mechanics, couldn't spot his modifications that quickly. "How do you know about standard engineering principles?" "I had a good education," Lynn said quickly, then changed the subject. "When can we start?" David studied her face. There was something desperate in her eyes, something that spoke of more than just casual interest in human engineering. But 50,000 credits was 50,000 credits, and his growling stomach reminded him that he hadn't eaten anything but recycled protein bars for the past 3 days. "We start tomorrow," he said, "but I have rules. You show up on time, you do what I tell you, and you don't complain when you get dirty. This isn't some fancy academy where they teach theory. This is real work with real machines that can kill you if you're stupid." "I understand," Lynn nodded eagerly. "And another thing," David added, I don't care how much money your family has or what kind of influence you think you've got. In my shop, you're just another student and I'm just a mechanic trying to make a living. No special treatment. That is exactly what I want, Lynn said. And for a moment her mask slipped. David caught a glimpse of something raw and honest in her expression. Something that made him think there was more to this request than simple curiosity. All right then, he said, extending an oil-stained hand. Welcome to Chen's repair shop. Try not to break anything expensive on your first day. Lynn took his hand in both of hers, her grip firm and warm. Thank you, David Chen. You have no idea how much this means to me. As she left, David watched her go and wondered what he had just gotten himself into. Rich aliens didn't usually want to learn how to fix things with their own hands. They hired people like him to do that for them. But 50,000 credits was 50,000 credits, and if a wealthy draconian wanted to play mechanic for a few weeks, he was happy to take her money. He turned back to the mining drill, but his mind kept drifting to the way Lynn had looked at his work. Like it mattered. Like it was important. David couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him that way. 3 weeks had passed since Lynn started coming to the shop every morning at exactly 7 o'clock. David had expected her to quit after the first day when he handed her a broken cooling unit and told her to figure out what was wrong with it. Instead, she had spent 6 hours taking it apart piece by piece, asking questions about every component and connection. Today she was elbow deep in the guts of a gravity generator that had been giving the miners trouble for months. Her expensive clothes had been replaced with work coveralls that were already stained with grease and metal shavings. Her hands, once perfectly manicured, now bore the small cuts and burns that every mechanic collected like badges of honor. The power coupling is damaged, Lynn announced, holding up a piece of twisted metal, but the replacement part costs 800 credits. And, David prompted, not looking up from his own work, and the miners who own this machine make maybe 50 credits a day each. Lynn frowned at the broken part. They cannot afford a replacement, so what do? Lynn was quiet for several minutes, turning the damaged coupling over in her hands. Then she moved to David's scrap pile, digging through bent metal and discarded components. She emerged with 3 different pieces, none of them the right part, but each containing elements that might work together. I make a new one, she said finally. David allowed himself a small smile. Show me. What followed was 2 hours of careful work as Lynn combined elements from the 3 salvaged parts to create something that hadn't existed before. She welded connections that shouldn't work according to any engineering textbook, rerouted power through pathways that violated standard safety protocols, and somehow made it all function better than the original design. Test it, David said when she was finished. Lynn activated the gravity generator, and it hummed to life with a sound smoother than it had made when it was new. The power readings were actually more efficient than the factory specifications. How did you know that would work? David asked, genuinely curious. I did not know, Lynn admitted, but you taught me that human engineering is not about following rules. It is about understanding what each piece wants to do and finding ways to help them work together. David nodded approvingly, but something in her phrasing caught his attention. What each piece wants to do? That's an interesting way to put it. Is it wrong? Lynn looked concerned. No, it's just, most people think about machines like they're just collections of parts, but you talk about them like they have personalities. Do they not? Lynn asked seriously. This gravity generator, it wants to create stable fields. The cooling unit from last week, it wanted to regulate temperature efficiently. When we understand what they want to do, we can help them do it better. David found himself staring at his student. In 3 weeks, she had absorbed concepts that took most apprentices years to understand. But more than that, she seemed to grasp the philosophy behind human engineering in a way that even experienced mechanics sometimes missed. Where did you learn to think like that? He asked. Lynn's hands stilled on her tools. What do you mean? That approach to problem solving. Most draconians I've met think in terms of hierarchy and command structures. They tell machines what to do, but you're thinking like a human, finding ways to cooperate with the technology instead of dominating it. Perhaps I have a good teacher, Lynn said quietly, but David caught the evasive note in her voice. Before he could push further, the shop's communication system chimed with an incoming message. David activated the display, expecting another repair request. Instead, he found himself looking at a news report from the inner system. This is Channel 7 News with breaking coverage of the Imperial fleet exercises near the Kepler Belt, the reporter announced. Emperor Titus himself is reportedly overseeing training maneuvers involving over 300 draconian warships. David glanced at Lynn and was surprised to see her face had gone completely pale. Her hands were clenched into fists and she was staring at the display with an expression he couldn't read. The Emperor's daughter, Princess Vera, was scheduled to observe the exercises, the reporter continued, but palace sources confirm she has been missing for over 2 months. Imperial investigators continue their search throughout the outer territories. The tool in Lynn's hand clattered to the floor. David turned to look at her, but she was already moving toward the shop's exit. "I have to go," she said without looking back. "Lynn." "Wait," David started, but she was already gone, leaving him alone with the humming gravity generator, and a growing certainty that his student had been hiding more than just an interest in human engineering. He turned back to the news display, where the reporter was showing footage of massive Imperial warships conducting maneuvers. The ships moved in perfect formation, their actions coordinated and precise. It was impressive, but David found himself thinking about Lynn's words. The ships weren't cooperating with each other. They were following orders from a central command. The difference might seem small to most people, but to a mechanic who had spent his life making broken things work again, it felt enormous. Human engineering was about finding harmony between different components, each contributing their strengths to create something greater than the sum of its parts. Imperial strategy seemed to be about forcing every component to serve a single controlling intelligence. David spent the rest of the day thinking about his missing student. Lynn had seemed genuinely excited about learning human techniques, but now he wondered if there was more to her interest than simple curiosity. The way she had reacted to the news about the missing princess suggested connections he hadn't considered. When evening came and Lynn still hadn't returned, David found himself worrying despite his better judgment. In 3 weeks, she had never missed a day or even been late. Her sudden disappearance felt wrong, like a machine that had been running smoothly suddenly developing a worrying noise. He tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting to the gravity generator Lynn had repaired. It was still running perfectly, its harmonious hum a testament to her growing understanding of human engineering principles. Whatever secrets she was keeping, her desire to learn had been genuine. David just hoped that when she came back, and he found himself certain that she would come back, he would be ready for whatever truth she brought with her. In his experience, the most interesting problems were often the ones that seemed simple on the surface, but revealed hidden complexity the deeper you looked. His student was definitely turning out to be one of those problems. Emergency sirens wailed across Titan's Edge as David rushed through the crowded streets toward his shop. The morning had started normally until every communication device in the sector began broadcasting the same terrifying message. A void kraken had become trapped in the asteroid belt, and its thrashing was sending chunks of rock the size of cities toward inhabited worlds. David had seen pictures of void krakens in nature documentaries, but those images couldn't capture the true scale of the creature now displayed on every public screen. The beast was enormous beyond comprehension, its tentacles each longer than most space stations. Worse, it seemed to be in pain, its movements growing more violent as it struggled against the asteroid field that held it trapped. When David reached his shop, he found Lynn waiting by the door. She had returned without explanation the day after disappearing, and had been unusually quiet ever since. Today, however, she looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. "Did you see the news?" she asked as he unlocked the door. "Hard to miss," David replied. "That thing could destroy half the sector if it gets loose the wrong way." They entered the shop together, but neither made any move toward their usual work. The emergency broadcast continued, showing footage of the Imperial fleet moving into position around the trapped creature. David counted at least 50 massive warships, their weapons powered and ready. "They are going to try to kill it," Lynn said quietly. "Makes sense," David said, though something in her tone made him look at her more carefully. "That thing's a threat to millions of people." "No." Lynn shook her head firmly. "They do not understand. Void krakens are not aggressive by nature. This one is trapped and frightened. Attacking it will only make it more dangerous." David frowned. "How do you know so much about void krakens?" Lynn was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the display showing the Imperial fleet's preparations. "I studied them once. They are actually quite gentle creatures when left alone. They feed on cosmic radiation and space dust, not on planets or ships. This one probably wandered into the asteroid field by accident and now cannot find its way out. Even if that's true, David said, we can't exactly ask it to leave politely. Look at the size of that thing. Perhaps we can. Lynn turned to face him, and David was surprised by the intensity in her expression. What if instead of attacking it, we helped it escape? Help it? Lynn, that's a void kraken, not a broken cooling unit. But the principle is the same, Lynn insisted. When we repair machines, we do not destroy the parts that are not working correctly. We find out why they are not working and help them function properly again. David stared at her. You want to treat a space monster like a mechanical problem? Why not? Lynn moved to the workbench where she had repaired the gravity generator weeks earlier. This creature is trapped because the asteroid field is creating gravitational interference that confuses its natural navigation abilities. If we could clear a path and provide guidance signals, it would probably leave on its own. David found himself actually considering the idea. It was completely insane, but then again, most of his best solutions had seemed insane at first. Even if that could work, we would need cooperation from the Imperial fleet. They're not exactly known for listening to suggestions from civilian mechanics. Lynn's expression became pained. I might be able to help with that. How? Before Lynn could answer, the emergency broadcasts changed tone. The news anchor's voice became even more urgent as new footage appeared on screen. The Imperial fleet had begun its attack on the Void Kraken, launching volleys of energy weapons that lit up space like a deadly fireworks display. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The creature's thrashing intensified and asteroids began flying in all directions. One chunk of rock, easily the size of a small city, barely missed a mining station that housed 50,000 people. They are making it worse, Lynn whispered, her voice filled with anguish. They're going to get everyone killed. David watched the footage with growing horror. The Imperial fleet's attacks were following standard military doctrine. Concentrated firepower designed to eliminate threats quickly and efficiently. But Lynn was right. Each weapon strike only seemed to increase the creature's panic and violence. We have to do something, Lynn said suddenly. She moved to David's communication console and began entering codes that made his equipment light up in ways he had never seen before. Lynn, what are you doing? Contacting the Imperial fleet. Her fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease, accessing communication channels that David didn't even know existed. I am going to tell them to stop the attack and listen to an alternative plan. They're not going to listen to a mechanic's apprentice, David protested. Lynn paused in her work and looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. They will listen to me. Something in her voice made David's stomach drop. Lynn, who are you really? I am your student, she said quietly. I am someone who has learned that human engineering offers solutions that traditional Imperial thinking cannot provide. And right now, I am the only person who can get you an audience with Fleet Command before they destroy half the sector trying to kill a creature that just wants to go home. The communication console chimed, indicating a successful connection. Lynn took a deep breath and activated the transmitter. Imperial Fleet Command, this is Princess Vera requesting immediate priority communication with Fleet Admiral Kane. David felt the world tilt around him. Princess Vera, the Emperor's daughter, the missing royal whose disappearance had been making headlines for months. His student who had spent weeks getting her hands dirty, fixing broken machines and learning to think like a human engineer. The response from the fleet came within seconds. Your Highness, please confirm your identity and location. Emperor Titus has been searching for you. Identity confirmed through genetic scan transmission, Lynn, Vera replied calmly. I am currently on Titan's edge and I have a solution to the Void Kraken crisis. Cease fire and prepare to receive engineering specifications from human consultant David Chen. David stared at her. You're the princess. Yes, she said simply. And you are the engineer who is going to save millions of lives by teaching an Imperial fleet how to think like a human. On the screens around them, the Imperial fleet's attack was intensifying. More asteroids flew toward populated worlds, and the Void Kraken's cries of pain and rage echoed across communication frequencies. Time was running out, and David realized that the young woman he had been teaching to repair broken machines was about to ask him to repair something much larger and more dangerous than anything he had ever attempted. Can you do it? Vera asked quietly. Can you find a way to help that creature escape without destroying everything in the process? David looked at the footage of the panicked Void Kraken, then at the Imperial fleet's ineffective attacks, then at the woman who had hidden her identity to learn human engineering from a simple mechanic. The problem was enormous, the stakes were terrifying, and the solution would require convincing the most powerful military force in the galaxy to stop fighting and start cooperating. "Yeah," he said finally. "I think I can." Fleet Admiral Kane's face filled the communication screen in David's shop, his expression a mixture of military discipline and barely controlled panic. Behind him, David could see the bridge of the Imperial flagship bustling with activity as officers tried to coordinate the ongoing attack on the Void Kraken. "Princess Vera," Kane said formally, "His Imperial Majesty has ordered your immediate return to the capital. We will dispatch a ship to collect you within the hour." "Admiral, the Kraken situation takes priority," Vera replied firmly. "I have someone here who can solve this crisis, but only if you stop the attack immediately." Kane's eyes shifted to David, and his expression grew skeptical. "Your Highness, with respect, this is a military matter. We have the situation under control. Do you?" David interrupted, pointing to the tactical display visible behind Kane. "Because from here it looks like you're making the problem worse." Kane's jaw tightened. "Civilian, you will address me with proper respect, or this communication ends." "David," Vera said quietly, "meet Fleet Admiral Kane, commander of the 3rd Imperial Battle Group and my father's most trusted military advisor. Admiral, this is David Chen, the engineer who is going to save your fleet from making the biggest mistake in Imperial history." David took a breath and tried to find the right words. He wasn't used to talking to admirals, but he was used to explaining why machines weren't working the way they should. "Admiral, what you're doing isn't working. Every time you hit that creature, it thrashes harder. You're not fighting an enemy ship that you can disable or destroy. You're torturing a trapped animal, and it's going to take the whole sector down with it if you keep this up." "The creature is a threat to Imperial citizens," Kane replied stiffly. "Military doctrine requires its elimination. Military doctrine is going to get everyone killed," David shot back. "Look at your own sensor readings. The Kraken's movements are getting more erratic, not less. Those asteroids it's throwing around are getting bigger and faster. How long before one of them hits something you can't evacuate in time?" Kane hesitated, and David saw doubt flicker across his face. "What do you propose?" David activated his own tactical display, showing a simplified diagram he had been working on while Vera handled the initial communication. "We don't attack it. We help it leave. Explain." "Void Krakens navigate by sensing gravitational currents and electromagnetic fields," David began, grateful that Vera had taught him about the creature's behavior. "This one is trapped because the asteroid field is creating interference that's scrambling its natural navigation. It can't find the path out. So we clear a path," Kane said. "We can destroy enough asteroids to create a corridor." "No," David shook his head. "Explosions will only create more debris and more interference. We need to guide it out gently, like coaxing a frightened animal toward safety." Kane looked unconvinced. "And how do you propose we do that?" David's fingers flew over his controls. "Transmitting detailed specifications to the Imperial fleet. We use your ship's gravitational generators to create an artificial current leading away from the populated systems. The Kraken will follow the current naturally, thinking it's found the path it was looking for. That would require precise coordination between dozens of ships," Kane protested. "The slightest miscalculation could destabilize the entire asteroid field." "Then we better not miscalculate," David said simply. Kane studied the specifications for several minutes while explosions continued to light up space behind him. "This plan requires our ships to position themselves dangerously close to the creature. If your theory is wrong, we could lose half the fleet." "If you keep attacking, you're going to lose half the sector," David replied. "Admiral, I've spent 15 years fixing machines that other people said were hopeless. This isn't different. The Kraken isn't broken, it's just lost. We show it the way home and everyone lives." Vera leaned forward. "Admiral Kane, you taught me battle tactics when I was a child. Do you remember what you said about knowing when to fight and when to find another solution?" Kane's expression softened slightly. "I remember, Your Highness. This is one of those times. The human approach offers us a solution that preserves life instead of destroying it. Isn't that worth trying?" Kane was quiet for a long moment, looking at the tactical displays and the ongoing chaos around the trapped creature. Finally, he nodded slowly. Very well. All ships, cease fire immediately. Prepare to implement the civilian consultant's plan. The change was immediate. As soon as the weapons fire stopped, the Void Kraken's movements became less violent. It was still thrashing, but with less panic and more purpose, as if it was trying to sense something in the sudden quiet. It's working already, David observed. Without the weapons fire interfering with its senses, it can start to feel the natural gravitational currents again. Beginning formation deployment, Kane announced. All ships take positions according to the provided coordinates. Engineering teams prepare to synchronize gravitational generators. David watched the Imperial fleet reorganize itself according to his plan. Instead of the aggressive attack formation they had been using, the ships spread out in a gentle curve that would create an artificial gravitational current, leading away from the populated systems. This is incredible, Vera whispered beside him. I have never seen the Imperial fleet move like this before. Like what? David asked, not taking his eyes off the tactical display. Like they are cooperating instead of dominating. Each ship is contributing to the solution instead of following orders from a central command. David glanced at her. That's the difference between human engineering and Imperial strategy, isn't it? We work with what we have, you try to control everything. Yes, Vera said quietly, and watching your approach work is making me realize how much we have been missing. On the display, the Imperial ships reached their positions and began activating their gravitational generators in sequence. David held his breath as artificial currents began to flow through space, creating a gentle path that led away from the asteroid field and toward the empty regions of the outer system. For a moment, nothing happened. The Void Kraken continued its restless movement, seemingly unaware of the new gravitational pattern surrounding it. Then slowly, its massive form began to orient itself along the artificial current. It's working, Kane announced, his voice filled with amazement. The creature is following the gravitational path. David watched as the enormous beast began to move purposefully for the first time since the crisis began. Its tentacles stopped thrashing randomly and instead began to propel it along the path the Imperial fleet had created. With each movement, it cleared more space in the asteroid field, reducing the danger to nearby worlds. Estimated time to full extraction? Kane asked. 6 hours if it maintains current speed, one of his officers reported. The creature appears to be accelerating as it moves farther from the interference zone. David allowed himself a small smile. Once it gets clear of the asteroid field, it'll be able to navigate normally again. It'll head for deep space on its own. Outstanding work, Consultant Chen, Kane said formally. Your solution has potentially saved millions of lives. Our solution, David corrected. Gesturing to Vera, I couldn't have done this without someone who understood both human engineering principles and Imperial fleet capabilities. Kane's expression grew serious as he looked at Vera. Your Highness, your father is en route to collect you personally. He should arrive within 12 hours. Vera's face paled, but she nodded. I understand, Admiral. As the communication ended, David found himself alone with a princess who had spent weeks learning to repair machines with her hands, and who had just helped save half the sector by applying human engineering principles to the largest crisis in recent memory. So, he said finally, I guess this is where you tell me the real reason you wanted to learn human engineering. Vera sat on the edge of David's workbench, her royal composure finally cracking as she stared at her hands. The same hands that had been perfectly manicured when she first entered the shop now bore the calluses and small scars that came from weeks of real work. She flexed her fingers slowly as if seeing them for the first time. I was supposed to marry Prince Marcus of the Helios system next month, she said quietly. A political alliance that would secure mining rights and strengthen Imperial influence in the outer territories. I have never met him, but my father assures me he is a suitable match. David continued working on a power converter, giving her space to talk while keeping his hands busy. The Void Kraken crisis was resolving exactly as planned, but he could sense that Vera's personal crisis was just beginning. The wedding planning consumed months of my life, she continued. Dress fittings, ceremony rehearsals, diplomatic briefings about my future husband's family and their political connections. Every detail was decided for me. The food, the music, the guest list, even the words I would speak during the ceremony. She laughed bitterly. I realized one day that I had no idea what I actually wanted. I could tell you the economic advantages of the marriage alliance, the strategic importance of the Helios system, and the historical precedent for such arrangements. But I could not tell you what kind of life would make me happy. David set down his tools and looked at her. So you ran away? I escaped, Vera corrected. And I chose the most unlikely place I could think of. A human repair shop on an industrial moon where no one would expect to find a princess. I told myself I just needed time to think, but the more I learned about human engineering, the more I realized what I had been missing my entire life. Which was choice, Vera said simply. When you taught me to repair machines, you always asked me what I thought the problem was, what I thought the solution should be. You never told me there was only one right way to fix something. You showed me how to understand what each component needed and find creative ways to help them work together. David nodded slowly. Human engineering is about problem solving, not following procedures. Exactly. But Imperial life is all procedures. There are proper ways to speak, proper ways to dress, proper ways to think about every situation. I have been following procedures my entire life, and I never realized how suffocating it was until I experienced something different. Vera stood and moved to the gravity generator she had repaired weeks earlier. It was still running perfectly, its quiet hum a testament to her growing understanding of human engineering principles. When I fixed this machine, she said, I felt something I had never experienced before. Pride in my own work, satisfaction from solving a problem with my own hands and my own mind. For the first time in my life, I created something instead of just being a symbol for other people's political goals. But you can't stay hidden forever, David pointed out gently. Your father's been looking for you for months. This crisis just forced you back into the spotlight. I know. Vera's voice was heavy with resignation. And after today, after I revealed my identity to save the sector, I can never disappear again. The entire galaxy knows that Princess Vera helped coordinate the Void Kraken rescue. I will be even more valuable as a political symbol now. David was quiet for several minutes, thinking about everything Vera had told him. Finally, he asked, What do you want to do? I want to keep learning, she said immediately. I want to understand more about human engineering, about creative problem solving, about working with my hands to build things that matter. But I also know my duty to the Empire and to my father. Maybe there's a way to do both, David suggested. Before Vera could respond, the shop's communication system activated. Emperor Titus himself appeared on the display, his presence filling the small space with Imperial authority. David had seen the Emperor in news broadcasts, but experiencing his commanding presence directly was overwhelming. Vera, Titus said, his voice carrying relief and disappointment in equal measure. You have caused considerable concern throughout the Empire. Father, Vera replied, straightening into a more formal posture despite her work clothes. I apologize for the worry I have caused, but I needed time to think. On an industrial moon learning to repair machines? Titus looked around the cluttered shop with obvious distaste. This is hardly appropriate behavior for an imperial princess. With respect. Your Majesty, David interrupted, surprising himself with his boldness. Your daughter just helped save millions of lives by applying the skills she learned here. Titus turned his attention to David, studying him with the intense gaze of someone accustomed to judging character quickly. You are the human engineer who developed the Kraken extraction plan. Yes, sir. But I couldn't have done it without Vera's knowledge of Imperial fleet capabilities and her understanding of the creature's behavior. She was essential to the solution. Interesting. Titus looked back at his daughter. Admiral Kane tells me you coordinated the communication between the civilian consultant and fleet command with remarkable skill. I applied what I learned about human problem-solving. Approaches to a military situation, Vera explained. David taught me to look for cooperative solutions instead of dominance-based strategies. Titus was quiet for a long moment. The traditional approach would have been to destroy the creature regardless of collateral damage. Yes, Father. And millions of people would have died unnecessarily. But your alternative approach saved those lives while also preserving a rare and magnificent creature. Titus seemed to be processing this information carefully. You believe these human engineering principles have broader applications? David and Vera exchanged glances. This wasn't the reaction either of them had expected. I believe the Imperial military could benefit from understanding alternative problem-solving approaches, Vera said carefully. Human engineering emphasizes cooperation, creativity, and working with existing systems rather than forcing them to comply. Show me, Titus said simply. Sir? David asked. Demonstrate these principles. I want to understand what my daughter learned that allowed her to see a solution that escaped my best military advisors. David looked around his cluttered shop, then picked up a broken navigation computer that had been giving him trouble for weeks. This unit is supposed to calculate jump coordinates, but it keeps producing errors. The standard approach would be to replace the damaged components with exact equivalents. He handed the unit to Titus, who examined it with surprising care. What is the human approach? We figure out what the broken parts are trying to do, then find ways to help them do it better. Sometimes that means using non-standard components or creating hybrid solutions that work better than the original design. David spent the next hour walking Emperor Titus through basic human engineering principles, using broken machines as examples. To his amazement, the most powerful ruler in the galaxy listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and even got his hands dirty examining damaged components. Fascinating, Titus said finally. These approaches require individuals to think creatively and make independent decisions rather than following established procedures. Exactly, Vera said. And that's why they work so well for humans. But it's also why I needed to learn them somewhere I could make mistakes without political consequences. Titus looked at his daughter with new understanding. You were not simply hiding from your responsibilities. You were preparing for them in a way that imperial education could not provide. I was trying to become someone who could offer the Empire something more valuable than just another political marriage, Vera admitted. Emperor Titus was quiet for several more minutes, clearly weighing decisions that would affect the entire galaxy. Finally, he spoke. Vera, your marriage to Prince Marcus is postponed indefinitely. Instead, you will establish a new Imperial Engineering Corps, dedicated to developing innovative solutions to complex problems. David Chen, I am offering you the position of Chief Technical Advisor to this new organization. David blinked in surprise. Your Majesty, I'm just a mechanic. You are the engineer who solved a crisis that defeated my entire fleet, Titus corrected. And more importantly, you are the teacher who helped my daughter discover her true potential. Vera's face lit up with hope for the first time since her father's arrival. Father, do you mean it? I mean it, Titus confirmed. But this is not a reward, Vera. This is a responsibility. You will need to prove that these human engineering principles can truly benefit the Empire on a larger scale. We will, Vera promised, and David found himself nodding agreement despite the enormity of what they were being asked to do. Then let us begin, Emperor Titus said. The galaxy has many problems that traditional solutions have failed to solve. Perhaps it is time to try something different. 6 months later, David stood in the largest engineering facility the galaxy had ever seen, watching teams of humans and Draconians work together on projects that would have been impossible under the old Imperial system. The advanced engineering complex on the capital world of New Draconius hummed with activity that reminded him of his old repair shop, but on a scale that still took his breath away. The fusion reactor design is complete, announced Sarah, a human engineer who had transferred from the outer colonies. By combining Draconian power systems with human adaptive engineering, we have increased efficiency by 40% while reducing the risk of containment failure. Excellent work, Vera replied from her position at the Central Coordination Station. She wore practical work clothes instead of royal robes, and her hands bore fresh tool marks from the prototype testing she had been doing that morning. What about the agriculture project? The vertical farming systems are exceeding expectations, reported Keth, a young Draconian engineer who had initially been skeptical of human methods. The hybrid approach allows each crop level to adapt to local conditions instead of forcing uniform growth patterns. Food production is up 60% in the test facilities. David smiled as he listened to the reports. The Imperial Engineering Corps had grown from a desperate experiment to the most successful innovation program in galactic history. More importantly, it had proven that cooperation between species could produce results that neither could achieve alone. David, Vera called out, the Transportation Committee needs your input on the civilian space traffic project. David made his way through the organized chaos of the engineering floor to where a mixed group of humans and Draconians were huddled around a three-dimensional display showing shipping routes throughout the galaxy. The old system had been rigidly hierarchical, with Imperial control ships directing all traffic through predetermined corridors. It was safe but inefficient, creating bottlenecks that limited trade and economic growth. "We have been thinking about your adaptive traffic management concept," explained Lisa, the project lead. "Instead of controlling all ships from central command, we create smart coordination networks that allow ships to negotiate their own routes based on local conditions." "Like birds flying in formation?" David nodded. "Each ship responds to the movements of nearby vessels, creating emergent patterns that are more efficient than any centrally planned system." "Exactly. But the Imperial Navy is concerned about security implications. They worry that without central control, hostile ships could more easily infiltrate shipping lanes." David considered the problem. It was exactly the kind of challenge that had made his work with Vera so rewarding, finding ways to balance competing needs instead of simply choosing one over the other. "What if we create hybrid zones?" he suggested. High-security areas near military installations use traditional Imperial control, while civilian trade routes use adaptive coordination. Ships transition between systems as they move through different regions. "That could work," Lisa said thoughtfully. "We maintain security where it matters most while gaining efficiency where it is needed most." As the team began working out the details, David felt a familiar sense of satisfaction. This was human engineering on a galactic scale, finding creative solutions that worked with existing systems instead of replacing them entirely. "Impressive as always," said a voice behind him. David turned to find Emperor Titus approaching, flanked by a small group of Imperial advisors. The Emperor had made these visits a regular occurrence, checking on the progress of projects and occasionally rolling up his sleeves to work on technical problems himself. "Your Majesty," David said formally, though their relationship had become much more relaxed over the months. "I have good news," Titus announced. "The Senate has approved funding for 15 new engineering centers throughout the Empire. The success of this facility has convinced even the most traditional senators that human engineering principles offer genuine advantages." "That is wonderful news." "Father," Vera said, joining the conversation, "which worlds will host the new centers?" "A mixture of human and draconian worlds, plus 3 multi-species colonies that have specifically requested the integrated approach," Titus explained. "The goal is to ensure that every region of the Empire has access to adaptive engineering capabilities." David felt a surge of pride at how far they had come. What had started as a desperate attempt to save his repair shop had grown into a movement that was changing the fundamental nature of Imperial society. "There is something else," Titus continued, his expression becoming more serious. "Prince Marcus has formally requested to visit this facility. He wishes to understand the engineering principles that led to the cancellation of his marriage arrangements." Vera's face tightened slightly. The cancelled wedding had been a source of ongoing diplomatic tension, though Prince Marcus had been surprisingly gracious about the situation. "Does he intend to cause problems?" David asked. "On the contrary," Titus smiled. "He wishes to establish a similar engineering program in the Helios system. Apparently, he has been following our work with great interest and believes it could help address some chronic resource management issues in his territory." "He wants to learn human engineering?" Vera asked, surprised. "He wants to learn the collaborative approach that has made this program so successful," Titus corrected. "Marcus has realized that the old ways of doing things are becoming obsolete. He would rather adapt than be left behind." David found himself impressed by the prince's pragmatism. It took wisdom to recognize when change was necessary, and courage to embrace new approaches even when they challenged traditional authority. "When will he arrive?" Vera asked. "Next week. I thought you might enjoy showing him some of the projects you have been working on." Vera nodded, though David could see her working through the implications. A visit from Prince Marcus would be closely watched throughout the galaxy, and how it went could influence the spread of human engineering principles to other systems. "We will be ready," she said finally. As Emperor Titus moved on to inspect other projects, David and Vera found themselves alone for a moment amid the bustling activity of the engineering floor. "Are you nervous about seeing Prince Marcus again?" David asked. "A little," Vera admitted. "But mostly I am curious. The reports suggest he has been implementing some innovative policies in his own system. Perhaps he truly understands that the old ways need to change. And if he does?" Vera smiled, and David saw in her expression the same excitement that had driven her to learn mechanical repair in his cluttered shop. Then we will teach him what we have learned, just as you taught me. Knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied. David looked around at the amazing facility they had built together, filled with beings from dozens of species working toward common goals using principles of cooperation and creative problem-solving. It was everything he had hoped for when he first agreed to teach a wealthy young woman how to fix broken machines. You know, he said thoughtfully, I think we have figured out how to repair something much bigger than gravity generators and cooling units. What is that? Vera asked. The idea that intelligence and creativity have to be controlled from the top down, David replied. We have shown that when you give people the tools and freedom to solve problems cooperatively, they can accomplish things that seemed impossible under the old system. Vera nodded, watching their teams work together with the kind of harmony that reminded David of a perfectly tuned machine. Human engineering principles applied to galactic society. Exactly. And just like any good repair job, once you fix the underlying problem, everything else starts working better too. As if to prove his point, enthusiastic cheers erupted from the agricultural section, where the vertical farming team had apparently achieved another breakthrough. The sound spread throughout the facility as other teams stopped their work to celebrate their colleagues' success. David smiled, remembering the quiet satisfaction he used to feel when a particularly difficult repair finally came together. This was the same feeling, but multiplied across thousands of projects and millions of lives. They had taken the simple human principle of working with what you have and used it to transform the largest empire in galactic history. So, Vera said, grinning as she watched the celebration, what impossible problem should we solve next? David looked at his former student, now partner in the greatest engineering project ever attempted, and felt the familiar excitement that came with tackling a new challenge. I am sure we will think of something. Around them, the advanced engineering complex hummed with the productive energy of cooperation and creativity unleashed. Dragons had learned to fly in new ways, and the galaxy would never be the same.